Dehumanization is the prerequisite of every genocide. When a people, based on their shared characteristics, are no longer regarded as human, then any atrocity can be perpetrated against them. The natural feelings of empathy which exist in every human, apart from the sociopathic, psychopathic, tiny minority which exists in all societies, that empathy is eliminated, not least if that people can be portrayed as an existential threat to the perpetrators. Again, the norm in genocides. And so has been the fate of the Palestinian people, right from the start of this genocide, with the former Israeli Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant, now subject to an international arrest warrant for war crimes and crimes against humanity, describing in those first days Palestinians as human animals to justify committing war crimes against them, as did the most senior Israeli general in charge of civilian affairs in the occupied territories. But the latest revelations underline just how extreme this dehumanization is and officially sanctioned. That the Palestinian people are seen as having less value, less worth than animals, specifically the starving dogs of Gaza. The Hebrew version of the Israeli newspaper Haaretz has published the testimony of an Israeli soldier named Hayem Ha-Zahav, who served with the Israeli occupation forces in Gaza. I'm going to read from this article because it is a crucial piece of evidence. Always need to be looking for crucial pieces of evidence to understand the scale, the gravity of this crime, and the intent. Always the hardest area of any genocide to establish intent. There's an abundance of evidence when it comes to intent, but we've got to keep accumulating it. We have to have the most overwhelming possible case for genocide given the dynamics we're dealing with here, which is a Western facilitated genocide. And establishing its genocide, therefore, means the mass complicity of our rulers and our elites, politicians and media outlets, and they will fight to the very end to prevent this being established as genocide, given the consequences that means for all of them. Let's go through this. He wrote, this soldier, and I quote, "A human life in the Gaza Strip is worth less than the lives of the thousands of stray dogs that roam the area looking for food. While there is a clear order prohibiting shooting dogs unless a soldier is in real danger, when the dog's jaws are locked on him, humans are permitted to be shot without any real restrictions, except for the personal, moral boundaries of the soldier holding the weapon." In other words, no restriction exists when it comes to Israeli soldiers shooting dead human beings, living, breathing human beings, whoever they are. That depends entirely on the moral compass, whether or not it exists, of the soldier in question, however much they have been dehumanized. And we can see in the polling, I'm afraid to say, how much of the Israeli population thinks, for example, not enough firepower has been used against Gaza, even though it's been wiped off the face of the earth. The large majority who oppose all humanitarian aid in Gaza, even though that means every single Palestinian dying. So, on the other hand, a stray dog cannot be killed, forbidden from being killed by Israeli soldiers, unless they have specifically threatened an Israeli soldier by clenching the dog's jaws on their body. Now, this soldier goes on to refer to how Palestinian family houses are called locations. The reason he explains is if you call it these homes locations, a clinical term, if you like, stripped of any emotive meaning, like home, it's easier for the internal moral compass, as he puts it, of a soldier to accept its use or indeed its destruction. And indeed, we have seen incessant mass destructions of Palestinian homes. These homes have been gleefully blown apart, destroyed, burned, and served up as social media comedy fodder on TikTok, on other social media platforms. The soldier notes how some of these homes, known as locations, have been turned into military outposts, even with running water connected to a pipe coming from the state of Israel. Of course, much of the actual civilian population deprived of clean water. Originally, the soldier says that the Israeli army occupying the so-called Netzarim corridor, which splits Gaza into two halves, north and south, and indeed, Doan said here, used to prevent civilians from returning homes to their homes, was used as a bargaining chip to get the hostages back. That itself hints at war crimes, of course, collective punishment. You can't treat the lives, the safety, the homes of civilians as bargaining chips. He goes on to confess that the Israeli government, months ago, they concluded that this area would no longer be used as bargaining chips. Therefore, he says, eliminating the moral basis for holding the area. Well, there was no moral basis in the first place. He discusses what the Israeli army is doing. He refers to the systematic destruction of buildings. So in quotes, he says, it is impossible to find an entire building that is more than a metre high, except the buildings that the IDF uses. They have all been blown up. The exceptions are the Islamic University, which Barak Hiram ordered to be blown up, and only the outer frame of the building is still standing, more or less, and the Turkish hospital, which is still standing despite numerous gunshot wounds. Everything else, he says, is gone. What he's referring to here is the deliberate mass destruction of civilian infrastructure with no military purpose of any description whatsoever. In other words, war crimes. Indeed, as he puts it, chillingly, I would say, well, the whole thing is chilling, where there used to be neighbourhoods and houses, there is now sea, sand and dust. The dunes are slowly covering the little concrete that didn't explode, and in a few months, no one will be able to guess that there were families, roads, cars, schools, fields, greenhouses there. Only a few stubborn plants and trees somehow managed to survive the explosion of the houses and the D9's pause. This work, he says, was mostly done before his battalion arrived. The job they were given was to destroy more and more houses across the river where civilians were ordered to move. He says the official goal is move the line of contact further away, but no one can offer an explanation for it. As he puts it, after all, the Palestinians need a place to be, and that's where the IDF demanded they move, and yet we're blowing up their houses. Well, it's clear that he's referring here, I would presume with faux naivety, is to ethnic cleansing. The Israeli military made it clear weeks ago, officially, they would not allow the people of northern Gaza to ever return to their homes. He talks too of the mass slaughter of civilians who are classed as having far less worth than the starving stray dogs of Gaza. He says there is a red line where Palestinians are forbidden from crossing and moving north. But he says they find out the hard way is an invisible line. He says they are shot to death as they approach this imaginary line that the IDF has arbitrarily decided on. And it changes from time to time. He says the line isn't marked on the ground. It's the commander of each sector who has to decide whether to do a warning shot to preserve the life of the civilian as they get closer, or simply to allow them to get closer on purpose so they can be shot and deliberately murdered. He notes it doesn't matter if they were a Hamas member gathering intelligence, or they were civilians coming to get personal possessions from their homes and simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. The moment they're killed by a sniper bullet or grenade tossed from a drone or a mortar shell fired from a distance, they're officially classified as terrorists. And the next day, he says the IDF spokesperson, the soldier says, will praise the heroism of the fighters who further reduced the number of terrorists in the Gaza Strip. A crucial detail, because apologists for the Israeli state keep throwing around statistics about the numbers of terrorists, inverted quotes, be killed. Well, so many of these are civilians who are slaughtered for no reason, often on the whims of the soldier, the commander, and then added conveniently into a spreadsheet classed forever as terrorists when they're just desperate civilians trying to survive. He speaks of a deeply revealing incident when one of the senior commanders in the sector ordered the shooting of a man who was waving a white flag and raising his hands unarmed very far from the IDF soldiers. When the commander was told that the man was holding a white flag and it was clear he had no weapons, he replied, "I don't know what a white flag is, shoot him." In this case, no soldier did shoot him. But the soldier says the fact the order was given testifies more to IDF values than any document he's ever seen. He says specifically, the lives of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip depend first and foremost on the private and personal scale of the commanders in the Strip. Anyone who wants to kill Arabs because they are Arabs will indeed kill Arabs, and no one will ask him questions, interrogate him, or punish him. This is total impunity. And from the very start, Israeli soldiers were told explicitly they had impunity. The Israeli defense minister, in the first few days after October 7th, 2023, officially, publicly told Israeli soldiers that he had lifted all restrictions and all restraints on them. They listened, they understood, and they acted on what they were told, as we can see. Now, we recall the incident, or we should recall the incident, in which Israeli hostages waving white flags last December were shot dead by Israeli forces. A few weeks later, Hala Kress, a Palestinian woman, was holding the hands of her grandson and waving a white flag, and she was shot and killed by Israeli forces on camera. There are multiple other examples filmed of Palestinians waving white flags who were shot dead, and countless testimonies about such incidents which were not filmed. As I've said over and over again, no crime in history so grave has been so confessed to so many times and boasted about as it actually happened as Israel's genocidal onslaught against the Palestinian people. Now, we can say that the Israeli leader is a man on the run, a wanted man for charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity. And we have to keep bearing witness to the crimes being committed and the confessions to those crimes, because we must not just fight for justice in terms of holding to account in courts for the Israeli leadership, but for those who facilitated their crimes in our governments. They have to be arrested. They have to go to prison. It sounds utopian until it isn't. These are people who will undoubtedly be around for a very long time. And it might take years. It might take decades. But they're not going to get away with it. Don't stop telling yourself that. This crime is too big, too depraved, too monstrous, too evidenced, too confessed to. They're not going to get away with it. But we have to keep making sure that all the evidence is there and we put it front and centre. And here is just one example amidst countless other examples of the worst crime of our age. Please like and subscribe. Leave your comments, your thoughts. Help us keep the show to take on the pro-genocide media at patreon.com/OwenJones84. We're going to be revamping the channel and expanding. I keep getting my Substack wrong. I keep asking you to sign up to my Substack, and it's owenjones.news. Thanks for those, many of you who've been in touch to correct me. It's been a long few weeks, so I've been off ill. But hopefully normal service resumes. Yes, so thank you for that. Listen to the podcast. All of this will be properly sorted. We're making progress. I'll speak to you soon.